I'm just going to read just a few verses, actually just a psalm. It's Psalm 11. Psalm 11. In Yahweh I take refuge. Would you put your voice to that? In Yahweh I take refuge. How then can you say to me, flee like a bird to your mountain? For look, the wicked bend their bow and their arrows against the string, to shoot from the shadows at the upright in heart. When foundations are being destroyed, what can the righteous do? Yahweh is in his holy temple. Yahweh is on his heavenly throne. He observes the sons of men, his eyes examine them. Yahweh examines the righteous, but the wicked and those who love violence his soul hates. On the wicked he will rain fiery coals and burning sulfur. A scorching wind will be their lot. For Yahweh is righteous. He loves justice. Upright men will see his face. Wasn't it comforting to hear earlier through the voice of Yahweh's messenger that at the end we shall see his face? We shall see his face. Oh, I want to see him. Praise his holy name. We're going to be presenting to you this evening the first message. And I just want to say to you that everything that we say this evening on this topic, it's for us, it's for our children, and for our children's children. Could I say that again? It's for us, it's for our children, and it's for our children's children. Our theme is, let the church be the church. This is a place you can say amen. Let the church be the church. Amen. The body of the Messiah. The church is the body of the Messiah. We heard that yesterday. Built up of living stones. Yes? The church has been purchased by Yeshua's own blood. And the church is called to be a light in this darkened world. So the church is the body of the Messiah, but it is called to be a light in this darkened world. It is called to be the visible manifestation of the invisible God. Hello, can I say that again? The church is called to be the visible manifestation of the invisible God. We're living in a world that is dark, and the world is crying out, they need to see Yahweh. The church is the visible image of the invisible God, Yahweh. You know, recently in our evangelism training, something was brought to us that blessed us. The trainer told us that we as believers are called to punch holes in the darkness. To punch holes in the darkness. That's what we're called to do. So we are saying, let the church be what it's called to be in every age. Every age. Yeshua has promised that the church will be indestructible. When I came in this evening, I came into the song, "The church triumphant is alive and well." It is indestructible. The gates of hell, he said, shall not prevail against it. We have that assurance. Our topic is on the margins. Now, is that the rightful place for the body of Yeshua in the world? Is it a rightful place? What do we mean by being on the margins? Well, let me say this. In the church world out there, they speak of churches on the margins in this way. If you're not part of the mainstream church, then you're on the margin. Yeah? You're a church on the margin. The Pentecostals, the evangelicals, and all these people in the church world out there, you're on the margin. That's not what we're talking about today. When we speak about being on the margin, we are simply taking a hold of what Yeshua said to the disciples. He said, Father, keep them in the world. He also said, be in the world, but don't be a part of the system of the world. So we are in the world, but we are not married to the world. The early church lived on the margins for quite a while. But when they got from the margin and got into the church, it was like a ship that took water in and it sank. Okay, so when we speak about being on the margins, we're talking about not being involved in the spirit of the world. Now, the pressing question facing us today has to be, is the church fulfilling its role and purpose in the world today? Can you answer me that? Is the church fulfilling its role and its purpose in the world today? Don't be afraid, you know. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, there are some people out there who are on fire and certain people who are doing their best. I won't gainsay that. But let me say something to you, that the church is made up of every believer. Whether they're living right or wrong, it's made up of every believer. And one sin, we are all in it together. All right? Can the church fulfill its role on the margins? Can it? Well, we're going to look at the church in this nation. We're going to look at the culture we're currently living in. Now, we're living in an atmosphere of growing paganism and breathless cultural change. Now, there are two crucial questions that needs to be asked by every local church. In biblical terms, what is the church meant to be and do? In practical terms, what changes must we bring about to enable us to be effective and build the bridge to this postmodern world? We will be addressing the first of those two questions in this message. In the UK, right now, would you call us a Christian country? We are living in a godless society. We were once proudly hailed a Christian country, but not so today. The Christian morals that once affected individual, community, and national lifestyles are now seen as irrelevant. No longer do the church wield any form of power or influence on laws and standards in this country. This age is now widely spoken of as the post-Christian age. The post-Christian age. And in the church, I'm saying to you, the Shekinah presence of Yahweh has largely gone. Would you agree with me? I sometimes feel like Moses when he said to Yahweh, if your presence does not go with us, don't take us from here. And in the church, it appears there is no reverential fear. No reverential fear. The rise of pagan worship is sweeping our land in the face of diminishing Christian worship. Many of our church buildings are closing down, only to be reopened as public houses, and in many cases, heathen temples and other forms of places of worship. The very mention of God in our society is frowned upon. Things righteous are not on the individual or the public agenda. In some of our schools, the truths of Yahweh are not widely taught. Laws which the word of Yahweh calls gross abomination are being passed with impunity, and to some degree are being warmly embraced and supported by some parts of the church and secular society alike. Brothers and sisters, we should be quaking. We should be on our knees. We should be praying. I want to say to you that very soon, the freedom to openly express one's faith will be denied. The mainstream church in Britain and Europe is in a crisis of decline. Listen to this. Between 1975 and now, churches in England lost 50,000 people each year. Could I say that again? 50,000 people each year. That is nearly 1,000 leaving the church each week. And not all are departing in coffins. The age profile in the church compared with the nation makes things worse. In 1989, 55% of the adult population were under 45 years old. While in the church, just 45% were under 45. Do you know that the least reached generation in England are those in their 20s? Where a staggering 94% have no real contact with the Christian church. That means that in the next 15 to 20 years, there will be more people dying in the church than in the nation. Therefore, unless something dramatic happens, the rate of decline of the church or church attendance is likely to accelerate. Small wonder. The Independent on Sunday, anybody read it? The Independent on Sunday commented that the Christian era, with less than 1/10 of the population attending church, can be said to be receding into history. It has been said by many that the church is something they can do without, irrelevant to the world of the 21st century, and surplus to requirements. So, what is the church in England doing about it? What are we, the body of the Messiah, doing about it? Now, has it always been the case that the church in England has been marginalized, ineffective, and considered irrelevant? Has it always been the case? No, you're nodding. It's not the case. It hasn't always been the case. So, come with me just for a moment or two as I look at the early beginnings of this nation. I want to say at the very outset that I do not support British Israel. Okay? I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but what I'm saying here today, I don't want you to mistake me by thinking that I support British Israel. Now, the Isles, which we call the British Isles, I'm going to boldly say to you, has a special place in the economy of Yahweh. That means you, every one of you in here today, young and old, has a special place in the economy of Yahweh. These isles were separated from mainland Europe for a purpose. Yahweh has a vested interest in this land. Looking right back into history, the history of this country, there is every reason to say that it is due to an act of Yahweh that we became a group of islands. There was a period in our geographical history when Britain was not an island. A period experts called pre-insular Britain. A period when this country was literally joined to the continent of Europe. You know that the chalk downs of Dover were united in one continuous range with the chalk cliffs of Calais. Did you know that? There were no waters of the English Channel flowing between. Furthermore, England and Holland were joined together by a wide marshy plain. And the Thames, our Thames, meandered majestically and merged with the Lower Rhine. Then suddenly, a tremendous severance occurred. A violent earthquake caused an immense convulsion to take place in the region of the North Sea, and a great oceanic surge came sweeping down the northern coast of Scotland, down towards the east coast of England. In the midst of this convulsion, the mighty marshy plains sank beneath the waves and admitted the mighty Atlantic Ocean to the North Sea and the Baltic. As a result, our islands were separated from the mainland Europe. Yahweh's got a purpose for you. He's got a purpose for this nation. For you, your children, and your children's children. Yahweh had a purpose for all of this. Since this mighty cleavage took place, those 20 miles of water in the English Channel had been a means of national salvation. Did you realize that? Some examples. You heard about the Spanish Armada? The mighty Spanish Armada, when Spain was the number one power of the world, they ruled the sea, and they were sailing to conquer this Britain because Elizabeth wasn't happy, didn't want to form a bond with the Spanish king. But you know, the English Channel is not the easiest piece of water to travel in. And when Yahweh is ready, you know, he begins to rule the waves. Not Britain, he begins to rule the waves. And the mighty Spanish Armada, which dwarfed the English little ship, fire ships, ended up on rocks. And they were destroyed. During the Napoleonic Wars, when Napoleon again was mighty and was sweeping Europe, Little Britain again stood alone. But again, the mighty Channel, the hand of Yahweh came to our rescue. What about the First and Second World Wars, when again this land stood on her own? If you want to know more about these things, read the history. I recommend Winston Churchill's History of the English-Speaking People. But was that the main reason? Was that the main purpose of Yahweh separating us? I say not. I believe Yahweh planned that these isles, which I'm calling Isles of Destiny, I believe that Yahweh's plan is that the message of the gospel of the kingdom would go from this land to the four corners of the earth. It's for you, for our forefathers, for our children, and for our children's children. Now, because of Yahweh's plan, he carefully planned that the foundations of this nation would be built on the Word. Hello? On the Word. Did you know that a purer brand of Christianity, nearer to that of the early church, was here earlier than Augustine's brand? Augustine came in AD 596. But when he came, the message was already here. It found fertile soil in the little principality called Wales. The Welsh singers, boy, they excite me when those men begin to sing. When I listen to them singing, I better not get carried away because there's two of us today. When I listen to them singing at the Millennium Stadium, when they took on England in the, come on Englishmen, close your ears, took on England in the Six Nation Cup and gave us a good hiding, when I listened to them sing, my heart was, there's something about the Welsh. That pure brand of Christianity found root in Wales, and many of the great revivals, if we had time, we could speak about them, actually had their roots down there in Wales. Winston Churchill wrote in his History of the English-Speaking People that Christianity was here before the first missionaries arrived. So from all that, we know that the hand of Yahweh was at work at a very early stage of our history to ensure that this country was built on Christian foundation. I visited a school looking for a place for my daughter. Do you know that my daughter is going to be 11 next year and going up to senior school? I can't believe it. I went to Blue Coat last night. I saw some more lovely ones were there. And the RE teacher proudly told me, we teach the Bible here. We teach the Bible here. It is a law that we have to teach it. So I said, you mean a Church of England law or a law of the land? She sort of went a bit quiet. She said, we teach it here. A politician's answer, we teach it here. When King Alfred the Great sat and wrote the laws of this nation at Winchester, Alfred the Great fought a number of battles against the Vikings in his little kingdom called Wessex. And he defeated the Vikings on many occasions. You heard of Alfred the Great, the one who burnt the cakes? That's what you know about him. He burnt the cake. But did you know that this was a godly king? Did you know that when he sat at Winchester to write the laws of this nation, the foundation that he laid, he wrote them on the Ten Commandments. On the Ten Commandments. Alfred said, there is only one way by which to build any kingdom, and that is on the sure and certain foundation of faith in Yeshua the Messiah and in him crucified. And it is on that foundation I intend to build my kingdom. And the gates of... Dare I say that? And the gates of hell? Our history has told us Yahweh has saved us many times. This nation had respect for Yahweh. It was governed on the principles of the commandments. It was governed by the book. And that secured for us Yahweh's blessing. If you want to know the sort of blessing I'm speaking about, go to Deuteronomy chapter 28. By the way, that didn't make us more special than anybody else, you know. The fact of the matter is, Yahweh chose us. It's Yahweh's choosing. Yes? The land had respect for Yahweh and his word. So Yahweh had respect for it. You respect Yahweh. You live according to what Yahweh says. And Yahweh will have respect for you. And the end product will be visible. Throughout the history of this island nation, Yahweh prospered, preserved, and protected it. Even when periods of darkness engulfed this land, Yahweh preserved for himself a remnant throughout, through whom he would bring restoration. How else, brothers and sisters, could an island nation of about 55 million people rule vast parts of this world? How else? Not possible. Yahweh's got a plan for us. I said earlier that Yahweh's plan is that we would take the gospel of the kingdom to the four corners of the earth. You know that the church during that particular period, running from Alfred and further down, I have crossed centuries now, the church also enjoyed Yahweh's blessing and favor. Even when Roman Catholicism seemed to taking the upper hand, Yahweh raised up a man. And I'm going to surprise you. Yahweh raised up King Henry the Great. Sorry. Is he the Great now? By the way, Alfred is the only king to whom the Great, British king, to whom the Great has been awarded. King Henry VIII, that rascal, was he? Do you know that Yahweh used him? Yahweh used them. I'm not going to go too much into it, but Yahweh used them. Just read the history books, and you'll see some of the things that Henry actually said in his determination. All we remember is the fact that he wanted to kick out his wife, and he wanted another one. Yeah, that's all we remember. But there are many things he said concerning the church. At that particular stage in our history, the Pope had replaced Yahweh Almighty. He was the head. Any church that enthrones a man or a woman is asking for trouble. Yahweh raised up Henry. Henry said, "Well, take no orders from any other than the God of heaven." He actually said that. And because of him, the Protestant arm of the church came about. We had men such as Wycliffe and Tyndale who provided Bibles in the language of the people. Roman Catholicism at that particular time locked the word up. And the priests were the only one who had studied Latin or whatever it was written in. And the ordinary man couldn't read it. These guys provided it. The influence of the church could be seen back then in the King's Court, in the Houses of Parliament. Ordinary people's lifestyles were affected and governed very much by the church. The church was on the margins, but it affected life in the nation. During periods of trial, when it seemed that this nation would be engulfed in the darkness of iniquity, Yahweh raised up men who would lead her back to the Messiah. And I'm going to give you two examples. The first is the 18th century revival, and the second is the Second World War. Now, England, at the beginning of the 18th century, was in a moral quagmire. It was a spiritual cesspool, according to many historians. The lifestyles of the first two Georges, kings of Hanover, of the House of Hanover, were so corrupt. Their corruption spread like wildfire throughout the nation, especially through the gentry and the upper classes. In the church, the gospel was not preached. That corruption started at the head, and it got into the church as well. The gospel was not preached. So William Blackstone visited the church of every major clergyman in London, but, and I quote, did not hear a single discourse which had more Christianity in it than the writings of Cicero. In most sermons he heard, unquote, in most sermons he heard, it would have been, he said, it would have been impossible to tell just from listening whether the preacher was a follower of Confucius, Mohammed, or Yeshua. Does that ring a bell today? I say no more. Morally, the country was becoming increasingly depraved. Drunkenness was rampant. Gambling was so extensive, that one historian described England as one vast casino. Bishop Berkeley wrote that morality and religion in Britain had collapsed to a degree that was never known in any Christian country. Very much like today. The ministers themselves were also corrupt. I'm saying that in passing. But round about that time, George Whitefield, an ordained Anglican clergyman, was converted. Are you hearing what I'm saying? He was a clergyman, not saved, but he became converted in 1737. And he began to preach in London and Bristol. And in order to reach the many non-churchgoers, Whitefield spoke in open fields, and large crowds began to gather to hear the message of salvation. Yahweh has always kept for himself a remnant. And when darkness seemed to be sweeping the land, up pops somebody whom Yahweh has kept. And I heard the word today. I am not trying to say to build anything to that word, but we're living in a darkened age right now. Is Yahweh looking for a man or a woman or a people? I think he is. Now, because of this man's dedication to Yahweh, a great revival broke out. John Wesley, an ordained Anglican priest, had gone to America to be a missionary to the Indians. He soon returned to England in despair, and he wrote, "I went to America to convert the Indians, but oh, who will convert me?" On the ship going to Georgia, Wesley had met some Moravian immigrants and was impressed by their spiritual strength and their joy in the Messiah. Did you hear that word? Their joy in the Messiah. I can imagine dancing on the ship. I can imagine hands clapping on the ship. I can imagine people shouting and praising Yahweh on the ship. And Wesley didn't have that. On May, back in England, as Wesley struggled with his own sinfulness and need of salvation, he received spiritual counsel from a Moravian called Peter Böhler. And so on May 24th, 1738, during a meeting at St. Aldersgate, it was round about 9:30, I think it was, Wesley experienced Yahweh's saving grace. I hope we're all listening to this. He had gone to America to preach, to convert, but he himself had not had that experience of knowing Messiah for himself. I felt my heart strangely warm. I felt I did trust in Messiah and Messiah alone for salvation. And an assurance was given to me that he had taken away my sins. Oh, hallelujah. Hallelujah. Yahweh used these men to fan the flames of revival which spread the length and breadth of this island. And I want to say to you, it's been suggested that the fires of the French Revolution that was blazing at the time were held back by the Spirit of Yahweh that was sweeping this nation. We could have become a republic. But Yahweh, he had a plan for this nation. He's got a plan, and it includes you, your children, and your children's children. The effects of this revival. Numerous agencies promoting Christian work arose as a result of the 18th century revival in England. William Wilberforce, many of you heard of William Wilberforce, yeah? 1833? Yeah, that famous day for slaves. William Wilberforce, aided by John Wesley, ended the slave trade. All out of this revival. In London, the first dispensary for the poor was open. Loan societies came into being out of the revival. Elizabeth Fry worked hard to reform prisons, and relief agencies for the poor were started. Numerous missionary societies were formed. The Religious Tract Society was organized, and the British Foreign Bible Society was established. Hospitals and schools multiplied out of the revival. Looking back, we can see how the missionary movement with William Carey in India and others touched the world. Touched the world. Did I say that Yahweh's plan was that the message of the gospel of the kingdom would go from these shores to the four corners of the earth? Yes? So William Carey in India and others, they touched the world. And at home and around the world, thousands sung praises to Yahweh, often using the hymns of Charles Wesley, and preached the message of hope which this evangelical revival had restored to the nation. In my mind, the will, the purpose, and the plan of Yahweh for this nation was largely fulfilled during that particular time. And through the men and the women of faith who took the good news north, south, east, west. It touched Africa, brothers and sisters. I do not have a chip on my shoulder. The fact that my foreparents were slaves, I do not have a chip on my shoulder. Not at all. I know I could have been in Africa, and I know the message could have reached me there, but I'm glad that I was born in the West Indies. The message got there. The message got to Africa. I'm saying Africa. Do you know why I'm saying Africa? Because this country is so decadent right now. We are in such a terrible state right now that the message of the gospel of the kingdom is coming back from Africa to us. And by the way, the Pilgrim Fathers, who were hounded out of this land, traveling, was it the Mayfair they traveled in? The Mayflower, yes, Mayflower. Yahweh used them to lay the foundation of the United States, and that was laid on Christian foundation. The revival cut across denominational lines and touched every class of society. England itself was transformed by the revival. And in 1928, Archbishop Davidson wrote, that Wesley practically changed the outlook and even the character of the English nation. Praise Yahweh for Wesley and all those who were at their posts. Now, in 1791, Wesley's life came to an end. He left a nation changed by the power of Yahweh. And his last words were these: "The best of all, Yahweh is with us." Those were his last words. And my second example, the world wars. The hand of Yahweh was again seen at work, saving and preserving this nation during the 2 world wars. Britain stood alone. Some of you, I don't know if there's anybody, well, yeah, you must be, because I'm around, and I was born after the war, not in the 40s, a bit later. Britain stood alone against the might of Germany. And when it seemed that the nation would go the way of many in Europe, Yahweh saved the nation. And again, the English Channel came in, because the Germans were fooled because of the weather condition. The invasion of France should not have taken place when it did. But there was an Almighty One in heaven who was doing something. He's in charge. Oh, hallelujah. You know, it was our godly king, George the VI. Have you watched the movie? What's it called? Is it The King's Speech? George had a stammer. But he didn't stammer when it came to these. The Almighty heard every word he uttered. Our godly king, he led the nation and the commonwealth in 40 days of urgent prayer. 40 days of urgent prayer, and Yahweh intervened. The entire house, after Germany surrendered, there was joy in England, joy in the streets of London. The Houses of Parliament convened. And member of Parliament after member of Parliament got up and spoke and said, we have to accept that there was a mighty hand, a mighty power at work. The Parliament, the House of Parliament did not sit that day to debate the conditions that were drawn up by it wasn't the League of Nations, whoever drew up the treaty. Is it the United? No, it wasn't the United Nations. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. They did not sit that day to debate that. To a man, they all agreed to go down to St. Margaret's Church, not far away, to give thanks to Almighty Yahweh for what he had done. That was the second time the Houses of Parliament did that. They did it during the First World War. So the nation, led by a Yah-fearing king, sought and received Yahweh's favor. The nation and the world was saved from Nazi and fascist domination. And now as I'm coming down, I cannot carry on in this vein. I'm going to look at the terrible slide. You would have thought, wouldn't you, that the nation would have pushed on in respect of service and dedication and love for Yahweh. But no, within a few years of the miraculous hand of Yahweh saving us from certain slavery and throwing the world into the grip of the enemy, this nation passed laws contrary to the word of Yahweh. We then turn our backs on Yahweh's chosen people, Israel, in their hour of need. We turned our backs on them. When we do that, please hear me. When we turn our backs on Israel, this nation did just after the war. Are we turning our backs on them now? When any nation or any individual turn against Yahweh's people, what does Yahweh do? You remember the song yesterday? I will bless. Yahweh said, you are on your own. You are on your own. And when Yahweh says you're on your own, what that means is he himself is against you. And if he's against you, who can be for you? And the nation began to slide. And we see the anger and the fact that Yahweh is against us right now. We can see it in our streets. We can see it on our television screens. And the result is lawlessness and iniquity abounding, not only in the nation, but also in the church. The church right now seems ineffective. And so I end with the question, with the question which David asked in Psalms chapter 11. When foundations are being destroyed, what can the righteous do? What can the righteous do? David was in trouble. Saul was trying to kill him. And his friends told him, flee like a bird to your mountain stronghold. Flee up there and there take refuge. And David's response was, no, Yahweh is in his temple. And it is to him that I will run. Yahweh bless you.
How is it possible for us to get from our current dire state to where Yeshua requires us to be? To be the church, to be the bride, to be the body, and on the margins. We heard we are to be in the world, but not of the world. Do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed, Romans 12:2. So, let me summarize our position as we see it. The bones of our world are very dry. The people are beyond hope. They are dead. They are lifeless. They are beyond resuscitation. If you breathe into somebody who's unconscious, you put your mouth on theirs, the breath starts to go around them and they gain consciousness. The people of our world are beyond resuscitation. They are very dry. And what comes from death? But a smell that is not good. A couple of months ago, this prophet said that Yahweh said that we, the congregation, would face an impossible situation. But, I love when the scriptures say but, and I'm saying a but. So there is a but. For creation waits in eager expectation for the children of Yahweh to be revealed. There is an anticipation. There is an expectation for the sons and daughters of Yahweh to be revealed. The world is looking for an alternative community, the true believers, the true church. And the Apostle Peter says in his letters to the believers, Jews and Gentiles across the Asia Minor, the now Turkey, believers of Yahweh, you need to wake up to your responsibility. You need to wake up to your responsibilities. And we're going to look at the dry bones, and we're going to look at Peter's letters, and we're going to try to see how they fit together today. I'm not going to be very long because Nathan's been long. The responsibilities, the situation was impossible, but the responsibilities are very possible. You see, it was the hand of Yahweh. And sometimes when the hand of Yahweh comes upon us, it is heavy upon us. And the pressure and the intensity of his hand is heavy on his children. And we shouldn't be alarmed, because Hebrews 12 says, "My son, do not make light of Yahweh's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because Yahweh disciplines the ones he loves. He just chastens everyone he accepts as his son or his daughter." The Apostle Peter suggested that any real change to affect our world, then the sons and daughters of the King of Kings, the church, will need to come under his scrutiny. For it is time for judgment to begin with Yahweh's household. And if it begins with us, what will the outcome be for those who do not obey the gospel of Yahweh? You see, let's just say we are, Corinthians tells us that we are the body of Yeshua, and I can't say they want to be an ear, and I can't, you know that scripture, yes? And we also know right at the end of that, it says, actually, if my big toe's hurting, my whole body hurts, right? So let's consider that as a whole thing today. If somebody is weak among us, then we're all weak. We're only as strong as the weakest link. So let's consider ourselves as we today. We are apt at pointing the finger at sin, and we say Yahweh will judge our world for its hypocrisy, its homosexuality, its apathy to Yahweh, and its depraved, messed up concepts about nature and the way things are meant. That's what we say. But let me say, Yahweh says, actually, it's not about the world, it's about the church. And he says it begins here, begins with you and me. Ezekiel says, can these bones live? And I ask myself, can this church live? Can Yahweh cause us to rise up and be revived? Now, let me just say this for those of you who are recently new to this fellowship and are experiencing the blessings. We embrace you. This is a spiritual home to you. But let me tell you that the Spirit of Yahweh that once moved in this place is not moving here as it was. And I ask myself, can these bones live? You see, the church, the congregation of Yahweh, we have been blessed and blessed and blessed and honored by Yahweh with so much. So much. And 50 years ago when we were celebrating our anniversary, we recalled what Yahweh has given to us. We mentioned the Sabbath. We mentioned the names. We mentioned the feast. I tell you, we are blessed. We have been blessed with so much. But the thing is, we have all the tools to be the church, and yet the world is waiting and looking for something other than what they see. You see, I ask myself, and as I've been preparing this message, I ask myself, Daslie, what do you do on the Sabbath? How do you honor Yahweh on the Sabbath? How do you respect Yahweh on the Sabbath? You know, quite recently I was offered a job, and it was really good money. And the lady said to me, yeah, the job's yours, they want you, da-da-da-da-da. And all we need is for one Saturday. One. And you know what? It was just a fleeting thought. Just straight through. That's not up for discussion. It's not up for discussion. I don't care how good the money is. When I was a young child, I was 11 years old, and I went to stay at Auntie Rachel's at Covenant College. And for those of you that know, in Gloria's old room, I was staying in there, and it was a Sabbath morning. I got up and I ran across to where Sister Princess used to be, for those of you that you know Covenant College. And then before I knew it, I was kind of running across the landing, as you know, the area. And this person came out of their room, up the stairs where Sister Mel and Brother Andrew used to live. What you doing running on the Sabbath? Walk. That was Sister Estelle from Jamaica. Oh. You see, there's something about the respect that we give to Yahweh and his holy things. Let me just give one other illustration, because time's going. I know, and I'm going to say it, I know we struggle and we chafe and we moan and we groan because we have to have a week off of the feast, and there's no time for my holidays, and there's no time for this, and there's no time for that. Let me tell you, we have been given something by Yahweh. We must respect him. We must respect him. It isn't good enough to say, I'll have a few days. We must respect Yahweh. And I speak to myself. I may only have 20 days, but let's give Yahweh his portion. Because the point is, the world is looking for the sons and daughters of Yahweh. And I need to move on. That's the first responsibility, that actually judgment begins at Yahweh's house. The second one is that he is expecting, and we heard this earlier, is expecting his sons and daughters to be holy. Now, you know what? We don't talk too much about holiness. When I was growing up in this church, we heard holiness all the time. All the time. You walked holiness, you talked holiness, you fasted holiness, you prayed holiness. It was all about holiness. But you know what that did for me as a child? Made me want to be holy. It made me want to be holy. I didn't want to talk that way. I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to do those things, because actually the DNA of Yahweh is holiness. And that should be in me. I should have that as second nature to who I am. Yes, I am Daslie, but I'm also holy. And the two join together. And so when I speak holy words. And I live holy life. I'm going to move on. The third responsibility. You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, Yahweh's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are a people of Yahweh. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. You see, there is something about the fact that I must accept that I belong to royalty. If the DNA of Yahweh is holiness, and that is what's supposed to be in me, then actually I'm a royal child. 2 weeks ago, a strapline came to my phone, and I looked at it. It's BBC News, and every time there's something major happens, it flashes to your phone. And I'm like, ooh, said this: Prince William only recently accepted that he had royal duties to perform and must resign from the armed forces after 7 years. I ask you, did he choose to be royal? He was born a prince. He was born a prince. He had no choice. Now, Prince William's choice for 7 years was to be in the armed forces. But his royal calling now demands that he surrenders his choice and accepts his royal commission. I must accept that I am a royal child and I cannot do what I please. I cannot go where I want to go. I cannot mix with the people I want to mix with. I cannot watch the things on the TV that I sometimes should. I cannot do these things because I have a royal calling and I am to be holy. I am to be holy. That is what I am. That is the responsibility that comes, and we must accept. We must accept. We need to stop fighting Yahweh and surrender. You see, it's easy for me to say, standing here now, I give up my dreams. Yes, I gave them up because I wanted to serve the Master. And Yahweh is gracious and he gives us time. A bit like Prince William, he had 7 years to do what he wanted. But now is time. And so I'm saying to the church, now is time. Let it go and let us surrender to Yahweh to do his will, because the world is looking for something other than what they see. The expectation of the sons and daughters of the Most High. The requirements of holiness demands a different walk, a different talk. And it's not about the congregation of Yahweh standards. I want to say that here and now. It's not about that. It's about the heavy hand of Yahweh on my life that maneuvers me, that pressures me, that says, come on, I've been waiting now. Surrender, surrender, surrender. It's the hand of Yahweh. It isn't anybody else. It isn't anybody else. It's Yahweh doing. It's Yahweh who led Ezekiel to the bones. But it was the hand of Yahweh that pressed him, and pressed him. See, Amy Carmichael coined a phrase. She said, in acceptance lies the peace. You know, if we just say, okay, yes, Yah. Yes, Yah. You know, the surrendering of one's will caused Yeshua to sweat great drops of blood. That's heavy. It's never going to be easy for us. But if he went through, we can go through. I'm closing. You see, the purpose of the church on the margins is that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. It's so that you will go and declare, so that you will go and tell, so that they can see something. Lively stones, as Edwin said yesterday. You see, Messiah is exalted. Messiah is exalted. It's not about me. It's him. Yahweh says to Ezekiel, he said, you know what? What I'm going to do, I'm going to send my spirit. You see, when the breath of Yahweh comes, Yeshua says, I'm going to begin at my house and I'm going to have mercy. I'm going to extend my mercy, but I'm going to go through my house and I'm going to purge through and I'm going to purify and I'm going to get my people to where they're supposed to be. And then he says, I'm going to breathe into them my holiness so that it becomes so a part of them that the DNA of the Almighty lives in us. And then when the breath has been poured out, then you and I will behave like royalty. We won't need to think about who I am because we'll walk like royalty. We'll be like Yahweh wants us to be. We are sons and daughters of the Most High if you accept it. And then the last thing he's going to do, you know what's going to happen? The breath of Yahweh, when it's breathed into you and I, there's going to be a vast army, and we're going to get up. And this vast army is going to fall in formation, and one behind the other, we're going to be as one. And we're going to go forward as one. As one, because I and my Father are one. And the vast army of believers in the church will go forward into the world because the world is looking and is expecting to see something. Expecting to see the sons, the royal daughters of the Most High. You see, it's the one man that goes into the world from the margins and affects the world. And Yeshua says, now go. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you.